Vastu house types. What is a Vastu house? It is a house that has been built from the ground up following Vastu principles. What are the Vastu principles? There's many, but here's a few. The house has to be aligned with the 4 cardinal directions. The house must have a compound wall. There has to be consideration of the Vastu formulas, Ayadi Shadvarga. There have to be rituals performed during and after construction, and they have to be performed on auspicious days, which is called Muhurta. The house has to be designed using a Vastu mandala as a grid design. All these are linked together by the astrological science, Jyotish. This is a Vastu mandala. Every Vastu house has to be designed within the context of this Vastu mandala. It is a 9 by 9 grid in which the Vastu Purusha is said to reside, and also all the demigods accordingly, as you see in this picture. Please make sure to watch the video on Vastu mandala if you want to learn more. Every Vastu house must have a compound wall. The compound wall doesn't have to be forcefully bricks, but it could be also plants, live plants, and it could be a moat, for example. But every Vastu house must have a compound wall, precisely because there has to be very clear difference or limit to where the Vastu Purusha resides. The first type of Vastu house is called Eka Shala. Eka means one, and Shala means house or room. This is the western house only, and it's pointing towards the Brahmastan, the 9 squares that you see in the center. This is by far the most common house design that you see in the world today that follows Vastu principles. The next house type is called a Dvishala. Dvi means 2, and you can see there's 2 houses within the plot, and then 3 houses, which is called Trishala, and finally the Chatushala. It's very rare to find a Chatushala these days. And the idea in the Chatushala house is that the house functions are split or divided. In this case, the northern house is the temple room, the eastern house is the kitchen. You can see the house in the south is a studio, and the master bedroom is on the west. By far, the most common Vastu house in the world today is the Ekashala. There are several reasons for this, but mainly is due to the overall poverty of the global population. The Ekashala design still requires a lot of space. As you can see here, this is a big plot. And since people have been leaving the country and moving into the city life, then the expenses in city life are even higher, which forces people to buy very, very small plots at a very high price. And because of this, even the Ekashala design that I'm presenting here is not accessible. So people are forced to build their house in a smaller plot. So what do you do if you have a very small plot and you can't have all this garden space outside to build your Vastu house? The most common approach in the world today is to put the house on top of the Vastu mandala in such a way that it is still compatible with the space. For example, adding a dome where the Brahmastan is. Although the house is on top of the Brahmastan, you add a skylight or some sort of dome to add that element of the Brahmastan within the house. And then the compound wall is usually built on a very small space around the house. I've seen houses in India that the compound wall is just 1 foot away from the walls of the house. Very, very tight, trying to follow all those principles. When designing the house itself, there are several guidelines to follow in the Vastu scriptures. There are several elements that must be included in order to have a Vastu house. For example, there has to be a paduka, which is the bottom part that you see here. It is compared to a shoe, and a house is compared to a human, and this paduka is compared to the shoe. And like a sandal, when you're walking in the street, you don't just go barefoot. You have some sort of protection. So this paduka also serves the same function. And then there's rules for designing the pillars, the rules for the dimensions of the house, the dimensions of the door, and the size and dimensions of the uttara, which is the top beam or top chain. You see here in yellow. And then there's also rules for the slopes of the roof. And once you have all these elements together, then that is the design of that house. There's again not too much restriction in terms of style, because each country in the world will have a certain style of decoration, for example. And there's not too much restriction based on that, but the elements or the principles, they have to be there. In India today, you will see in the newspaper or online, many people say, oh, I will sell, this is a Vastu house, or they rent a Vastu house. And they don't even have half of these things. Everything is just a mishmash. And this has to do with a little bit of the misinformation. There's a lot of washed down knowledge that is just totally bogus or speculated, incomplete. That is why we always recommend that whenever engaging in any kind of Vastu project, to always go back to the scripture, to the original scripture. And that's the best way, ideally, to have a guru to personally teach you. Within the scripture, Manusyalaya Chandrika, there are many guidelines on what to look for and what to avoid while constructing a Vastu house. It in fact recommends that you hire an acharya, someone really expert in architecture, to build a house. There are many inauspicious results that happen if we just build randomly. And here's, for example, in the case of a Dvishala, in table 4.05, it gives the result of different types of Dvishala. If you make a Dvishala, remember, is a two-house construction, with only the southern and northern house, then the result will be quarrel and fear. If you build only the western and eastern, that is called Siddhartha, then you acquire wealth. And so on and so forth. Death, fear, misery, quarrel, acquisition of wealth. So you will notice that there's only two options within the Dvishala that are actually desirable. It's not very nice to have a house where there's fear and misery all the time. So it's not precisely what you're aiming for. And the same goes for the Trishalas in table 4.04. Two of them are prosperous and wealth, and then the other are loss of wealth, loss of children, enmity. So this explains why there is so much trouble in architecture and in the world today, because the houses are built randomly without following any kind of Vastu guidelines. And we see there's a lot of divorce and quarrel and fear, misery, because there's so many Vastu faults that even this simple thing as where or how many houses to build within the plot, it makes a huge difference in the way you experience life. I don't know if you've also in your life moved from one house to another, but you will notice that as soon as you move into another house, it's a totally different experience or results that you get from your daily activities. Within the Chatushala, or the four-house design, there are several variations. In fact, there are 9 subcategories. The one I show you, the simplest, which is just 4 buildings separate, is called Vishuddha Bhinna Shala, which means pure separated houses. But you can also add corner houses. This is, for example, a Shlishta Bhinna Shala. in which there's a corner house that joins the west and south house, and a corner house that joins the north and east house. There's also, for example, Samslishta Bhinashala, which is what you will find more frequently online when you look for Chatushala. It would be like a square donut, and the center of that donut would be the Brahmastan. It's like an open to the sky, and then from the outside you only see one single big building. It's called Samslishta Bhinashala. And there's other types that you can further study by reading Manushyalaya Chandrika. What are the benefits of a Vastu house? There are many risks that even during construction will be avoided. For example, failure to complete construction, severe accidents, severe problems with weather, and laborers quarreling. What are the effects of living in a Vastu house? Natural feeling of protection and security, overall health and well-being, wealth and financial stability, encourages pure goodness and spiritual practices, no excessive quarrel and no sinful activity, greatly reduce theft and greatly reduce risk from natural elements.